Has this ever happened to you?
I don't want to go to music class.
In this video, I want to give you my top 5 tips that build off of one another so that you can become a master of your classroom in terms of behavior, and you can really dig into teaching music and affecting lives your first few years in elementary school music. And notice in this video, I'm not talking at all about music content knowledge for your students or music techniques per se. I'm talking about classroom management for the music teacher. Because if you can nail down classroom management, this stuff and what you learned in music school is going to be a breeze. Classroom management makes teaching the content easier in the same way that playing long tones makes playing your instrument easier. So before I even get started, my primer for this is you need to pick up the book Classroom Management for Art, Music, and PE Teachers by Michael Linson, a lifesaver. It's not a difficult read, it's really interesting, and you should really underline a ton of stuff in it. Okay, now to the tips. Routines, routines, routines. That's the very first thing you have to get through your head. It may seem tedious, it may seem like you're wasting time, but just like good fundamentals in band class, it's not wasting any time. It saves you time in the long haul and makes you better at your job. So for about the first 4 to 6 weeks, you really have to cover routines. It's going to be things like coming in the classroom the correct way, knowing where they sit in the classroom, knowing what your expectations are, knowing what your rules are, knowing what your consequences are, knowing how to line up. What's the first thing you do every class? You have a warm-up activity? Do you have something you do after that? The list goes on and on. In elementary school, they will think of every way possible to do it the wrong way, so you might as well be specific. Every single thing you do, you need to lay out exactly the way you want it done. You need to tell them, you need to show them, you need to have one student show them that's doing a great job. Then you need to have a small group of the students show them. And finally, have everyone try it in the class. Whether that be lining up, how to come in the classroom, standing up when you give a command, etc. And if they mess it up, as a whole class the first time, have them complete it, sit them back down, and just take them back to where the routine started and try again until they get it right. Don't get mad, just have them do it again until they get it right. And not kind of right, exactly the way you want it done. Again, it may seem tedious, just like long tones or lip slurs if you're a high school band person or a middle school band person, putting those fundamentals into our playing ability. It may seem tedious, doing scales is tedious, but I'm telling you, taking the time to make that happen will make your classroom that much more manageable in the long haul. And springboarding off of that, my second big takeaway is take your time. In high school, I had 90 minutes to teach a band class, which can feel like forever, but it gives you plenty of time to work on those fundamentals and still get to other things and set up those expectations on day one. In elementary school, at least what I've seen, it's usually around 45 to 50 minutes per class. You may feel the need to speed up and try to rush through everything and go, okay, well, that's good enough. Trust me, take your time. If they're not complying, you don't need to let up. You need to keep holding them to that standard that you want. Make them do it again until they get exactly what you want at the very beginning of the school year. We're different from other teachers. I think they should do the same thing, but we see 400 kids usually once a week or less. We have to make sure that when they come to us, our routines are clear and our rules are clear. So making sure that you take your time to get exactly what you want means they're not going to fall into bad habits. They're going to only know the habits that you have for your classroom and your expectations. So don't speed through a lesson. Don't speed through the rules. I know we've all been there and feel like we're rushing. I wouldn't plan on personally getting to too much content. Keep it light within the first 4 to 6 weeks of school. And then after that, you can kind of know and make it happen. For me, behaviors can sometimes be particularly bad, so I remind my students every day what the rules and expectations are, because again, it's been probably a week or more since they've seen me. Take your time. Have them do it correctly. You'll thank me later. Clear and easy rules and consequences are the next step. Without these, the behaviors that you set up won't matter. So with rules and consequences, I use a 3x3 approach. I have 3 rules and 3 consequences. For some of my younger grades that are still learning and some of my harder classes in terms of behavior, I do 4 for consequences, but again, your mileage may vary. My rules are listen and follow directions, raise your hand, be nice. This covers a multitude of things. My consequences are also just as simple. You get a warning, or sometimes 2 warnings in those harder classes or younger classes. And then I send them to timeout for 15 minutes. 15 minutes may seem like a very long time, and it did for me when I first read about it in this book. But what it does is really put the emphasis on how important following your directions are, because they're gonna miss out on something cool in your classroom. If those students are in timeout and you've explained to them that if they stay in timeout, they're to be quiet and attentive and not talking to others or rolling around on the ground, they're supposed to be paying attention, but silently in timeout. If they do that after 15 minutes, you invite them back to class and the slate is wiped clean in terms of consequences for the day, which means they start over with warnings, etc. However, if they do roll around on the ground, if they're kicking and screaming, if they're still talking to other people, not paying attention, then I leave them in timeout. And my final consequence is picking up the phone and calling a parent, messaging a parent if that's their preference, whatever the case may be, so that a parent is contacted. And that generally keeps people from wanting to do poorly in timeout. I really emphasize this. You can't make this personal. When you send a kid to timeout, it's just a fact of breaking a rule. It is a consequence for breaking a rule. It's not personal. You don't need to add any snarky remarks. You don't need to make it seem like you're hurt or upset. You just need to say, you broke rule number 2. It's time for you to go to timeout because this is the 3rd rule you've broken today. And you don't walk them there, you show them where to go and they go. And you continue to insist if they're not going. Because if you take the emotion out, it seems like personal and it won't ruin that relationship you have with the student in terms of just being a consistent teacher. The rules are just facts, the consequences are just facts if you break them, and it, again, doesn't feel personal. And a lot of them know they've done it and they say, I'm sorry, and they go, or they catch themselves after a while. The 4th one is don't speak over students. I have personally been wrong with that this week, but I'm telling you, best practice, don't speak over your students as the 4th rule. Because the more you talk over students, the louder you have to be, and the more they realize as they're not listening when you're talking, they realize that they don't need to listen to you. So they start to tune out your voice. I've always struggled with having every eye on me when I'm speaking, because that way you know they're listening. We're not only listening with our ears, we're listening with our eyes. If you make sure you don't give your instructions until everybody's looking at you. Hey, I need all eyes on me. Make sure you're watching me. All eyes on me. All eyes on me. I love how Jimmy Bob over here is looking at me. He's doing a great job. Oh, I love Susie Q over here. She's doing a really great job of looking at me, and you'll be surprised at just how many eyes get on you super fast. Once you do have eye contact with every person, their mouths are generally closed at that point because they're looking at you and not talking to their neighbor, then you can give the instruction. And believe it or not, talking quietly provides more intrigue and forces them to listen in, or they're going to miss the directions. So a lot of times I felt like I've needed to yell in a moment or raise my voice so they could hear me, and I backed down just to test it. And surprisingly, the room got quieter than if I would have tried to fight, and my blood pressure is lower. So really give it a shot. Less is more in this case. Every eye on you before you speak. Otherwise, kids learn not to listen to your voice. And this last one has been a game changer for me, but it doesn't work unless you've done the other 4. You need to give your instructions, tell them what to do, and then turn them loose by saying go. I like to call it instructions and go. You only tell them the directions one time. You say, in a moment, when I say go, then you insert your instructions. You ask, are there any questions? That way it's now on them. It is their responsibility if they do not understand. Usually there's a good question or no questions. And then once you've answered those, you say, all right, go. And then the hardest part for me was stepping back and just letting them go without going and interjecting. Oh, Susie, watch out. You need to be on. Hey, look out. Step back. Keep a safe eye on them to make sure no one's going to get injured or hurt. You can't just turn your back. Look and see. Don't say anything. Don't redirect unless there's a safety issue. You'll see leaders emerge from this. Student leaders will start to pop up. Hey, Mr. Ankeny said, get on an orange spot instead of a lime green one. Or Mr. Ankeny said you need to go do this. Oh yeah, thanks. And you'll see them start to interact. And this is my favorite thing because they get it done. You also see whether or not your instructions were clear enough for maybe later in the week. And you get to see learned helplessness start to decrescendo out of the classroom. I think this generation in particular that we're teaching now has a lot of learned helplessness. For example, I had a kindergartner at lunch the other week that wanted me to open their milk jug again because we had started doing that and showing them early on. And I'm like, you're about to be a first grader. I bet you can open it on your own. Try it. They did it. They were so proud of themselves. They are able to do more than we could possibly think. So give them a chance. If it goes horrifically wrong, you've got information. And if it's really bad, go back and do it again with the specifics that you asked after they've tried it. Okay, not in the middle of it, but after they've tried it once. I love that learned helplessness is beginning to disappear. So that's it. I've taught 1 year of elementary music. We're wrapping it up right now. Behaviors are hard right now all across the United States. Makes it hard to teach. It makes this profession difficult. But at the end of the day, I'm very solution oriented. So if you have tips that maybe I didn't mention in this video, leave them below in a comment. I'm sure many educators would love to hear from you. And I cannot wait to use all of the tips and knowledge that I've gained from this year and springboard to start next year like that. And will I go back to band directing at some point? Maybe. But for right now, this is my assignment. This is what I am definitely called to do. And I'm excited to continue to get better at it and improve my school and my community and my school culture and just make the best of every opportunity. Don't forget, as a music teacher, you see every or almost every student in the entire school. You have a major impact. Use it and make the school a better place. And yes, there are gonna be days that are bad. There are gonna be days that you mess up these rules. There are gonna be things you learn. But it's important that you get back on the horse and you keep going. You keep having a solution-oriented approach. Try something you've never tried before. You may surprise yourself. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, maybe stick around and watch another one, or subscribe and see what other new music education content we're gonna have in the future. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you guys later.